A millionaire asked his daughter to choose a new mother from among 5 wealthy women, but she chose the black cleaning lady when she discovered the truth about who really took care of her. "This woman shouldn't even be in the same room as us," Victoria Ashworth whispered to the other candidates as she watched Kesha Williams silently clean up the crystal shards scattered across the marble floor of the Blackwood mansion. The glass had been accidentally knocked over during lunch by the 5 socialites competing to become the new wife of millionaire widower David Blackwood. Kesha, 28, had been working at the imposing Atlanta mansion for only 3 months, but she had already completely transformed the life of 7-year-old Emma, who had lost her mother in a car accident the previous year. What the candidates didn't know was that every cruel word, every look of contempt, and every attempt at humiliation was being carefully observed by someone who held secrets far deeper than they could imagine. "Daddy, why are those women being mean to Kesha?" Emma had asked that morning. Hiding behind David's office door, his daughter's innocent question echoed in the businessman's mind as he watched through the security cameras, seeing Kesha humiliated by the 5 candidates who had arrived 2 weeks earlier to participate in his marriage competition. The idea had come from his therapist. Allow Emma to live with different women for a month, and then choose who she would like to be her new mother. David had carefully selected 5 women from high society: a lawyer, a doctor, a businesswoman, a socialite, and an architect. All white, all rich, all seemingly perfect on paper. But from day one, something disturbing began to happen. The 5 women, led by the cruel Victoria Ashworth, heiress to an oil fortune, declared a silent war on Kesha. Not because she was a threat. After all, she was just the cleaning lady, but because Emma clearly preferred spending time with her rather than with any of the candidates. "That girl needs to learn about social hierarchy early on," declared Priscilla Montgomery, the lawyer, during a dinner party they thought they were attending alone. "It's important that she understands who the appropriate people are for her social class." What they didn't know was that David had installed microphones throughout the house after noticing strange changes in Emma's behavior. The girl, who was finally starting to smile again, had returned to having nightmares and anxiety attacks. Kesha, who had a degree in education but was working as a cleaner to support her sick mother, never imagined that her natural kindness toward Emma would trigger such cruelty. Every morning, while preparing breakfast, she overheard poisonous comments about people who don't know their place and inappropriate influences for children from good families. But there was something none of the 5 candidates noticed. Kesha's eyes shone with a quiet determination, forged by years of facing prejudices far worse than these. And when she bowed her head in the face of insults, it wasn't submission, it was strategy. She had learned that the best revenge comes to those who wait for the right moment. If you're enjoying this story of how prejudice can turn against the prejudiced, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because what these women didn't know was that their days of humiliating Kesha were numbered, and their downfall would be far more spectacular than they could have imagined. The next morning, Victoria gathered the other 4 candidates in the mansion's private library, far from the eyes and ears they imagined might be watching them. The plan being hatched was as cruel as it was meticulously calculated. "We need to be strategic about the situation," Victoria said, adjusting her diamond earrings as she watched Kesha through the window, playing hopscotch with Emma in the garden. "That woman is influencing the child in a way that is inappropriate for our social class." Priscilla Montgomery, the corporate lawyer, opened her Italian leather address book. "I've checked the legal procedures. David can fire any employee for cultural incompatibility without any labor issues." "Cultural incompatibility is just a fancy euphemism," laughed Christina Hawthorne, the dermatologist who catered exclusively to Atlanta's elite. "The problem is more obvious than that." Rebecca Sterling, the architect who had designed mansions for 3 governors, shook her head in disdain. "Emma needs to learn early on about appropriate associations. This closeness to the help is creating unrealistic expectations about social relationships. Amanda Chase, heiress to a chain of luxury hotels, was more direct. Let's stop beating around the bush. The problem is that a black cleaning lady is taking up emotional space that should be ours. Emma should be clinging to one of us, not her. What none of them knew was that Kesha had grown up hearing conversations exactly like this one. The daughter of a housekeeper who had worked for wealthy families for 30 years, she knew every code, every euphemism, every strategy that privileged people used to justify their cruelty. At 14, Kesha had witnessed her mother being fired after 20 years of impeccable service, simply because her employer's son had become too close to her. The veiled accusation of not knowing her place had echoed through the halls of that Charleston mansion. And now, 14 years later, the same poisonous whispers were resurfacing in Atlanta. But there was something these women couldn't see behind Kesha's apparent humility. Her education at Clark Atlanta University had not been just a degree. It had been a silent declaration of war against the system that had tried to break her family. During the 3 years she had worked in public schools, before being forced to take domestic jobs to pay for her mother's cancer treatment, Kesha had learned to read people with surgical precision. She knew exactly when she was being underestimated, and more importantly, how to use that underestimation to her advantage. "Emma, sweetie," Victoria said that afternoon, intercepting the girl as she ran to find Kesha in the kitchen. "How about we play something more sophisticated? I brought a chess set back from France especially for you." "I don't know how to play chess," Emma replied, trying to continue on her way. "That's exactly why you need to learn," insisted Priscilla, gently blocking the hallway. "Intellectual games are important for the development of privileged minds. Kesha taught me how to play checkers yesterday," said Emma, unaware of the tension her words created. "She said games help you think better no matter what they are." Christina exchanged a meaningful glance with the others. "Honey, there's a difference between types of games. Some are more appropriate for certain people." It was at that moment Kesha appeared at the kitchen door, carrying a tray of still warm cookies. She had heard every word, but her expression remained serene, almost maternal. "Sorry to interrupt," she said with a politeness that bordered on perfection. "Emma, your chocolate chip cookies are ready." The girl's eyes lit up instantly. "Kesha, did you make the butterfly-shaped cookies like you promised?" "I did, sweetie, and I saved some extra for after dinner." Victoria watched the interaction with growing irritation. The natural affection between them was undeniable, and it made her mission even more urgent. "Kesha," Victoria said, trying out the maid's name for the first time but pronouncing it as if it were an unpleasant foreign word. "Don't. You think you're taking on too much responsibility with Emma? We're here to take care of those developmental needs." Kesha smiled politely, but something flashed in her dark eyes. "Of course, Miss Victoria. I was just following Mr. David's instructions about keeping Emma fed and happy." "Naturally," Amanda added, joining the conversation. "But feeding is different from forming emotional bonds. It would be best to maintain an appropriate professional distance." "I understand perfectly," Kesha replied, her voice carrying the same dangerous sweetness. "I've always been taught that caring for children means giving them exactly what they need, when they need it." The answer was too polite, too diplomatic, and it made the 5 women uncomfortable. There was something about Kesha's calmness that suggested a far sharper intelligence than they had assumed. That night, David watched discreetly through the cameras as the candidates organized their next move. They had decided to document every one of Kesha's transgressions, creating a dossier of inappropriate behavior to present to him. What David was discovering, however, was very different from what they thought they were documenting. Each video showed Kesha being professional, caring, and genuinely attentive to Emma's needs. In contrast, it showed 5 adult women visibly uncomfortable with the natural affection between a child and her caregiver, but something more disturbing began to emerge from the recordings. David noticed a pattern in the candidates' actions. Small acts of sabotage, calculated comments designed to undermine Emma's trust in Kesha, and subtle attempts to create situations where she would appear incompetent. "Daddy," Emma said that night during dinner, "why don't the ladies like Kesha?" The question hit the table like a silent bomb. The 5 candidates froze, their forks suspended mid-air. "What kind of question is that, sweetie?" Victoria asked, forcing a motherly smile. "We like all the staff." "That's not true," Emma replied with the brutal honesty of children. "I heard you say she didn't know her place." David felt the blood drain from his veins. "Emma, where? Did you hear that?" "In the library this morning, they were talking about making Kesha go away." The silence that followed was deafening. 5 intelligent, articulate women suddenly found themselves speechless, for a 7-year-old child had exposed their conspiracy with the precision of a seasoned prosecutor. "Emma, you must have misunderstood," Priscilla said quickly. "Adult conversations sometimes sound different to children's ears." But David was watching the expressions around the table, and every face confirmed that Emma had understood perfectly. Worse, he was beginning to realize that his daughter wasn't the only one who had been underestimated in this house. Each new humiliation, every attempt to diminish Kesha, only strengthened something inside her. A silent strength fueled by the very injustice they tried to impose. It was built on years of resistance that had begun long before she set foot in that mansion, and now it grew with the certainty of someone who knows that the best revenge is letting your enemies destroy themselves with their own arrogance. On Wednesday morning, Kesha woke 2 hours earlier than usual and called her older sister Diane in Washington, D.C. The conversation took place in whispers in the small room she occupied in the mansion's annex. "Diane, I need you to do something for me," Kesha said, looking out the window at the still dark lights of the main house. "Remember those contacts you made when you worked at the Department of Education?" Diane Williams Johnson, a graduate of Howard University with a degree in investigative journalism and now a producer at CNN, immediately sensed the tension in her sister's voice. "Kesha, what's going on? You never call me at this time of day. I'm being attacked by 5 wealthy women who want to get me out of here, and I need ammunition to defend myself." For the next 20 minutes, Kesha meticulously detailed every humiliation, every racist comment disguised as social concern, and every attempt at sabotage. Diane listened silently, her journalistic experience immediately recognizing the patterns of systemic discrimination she had investigated for years. "Kesha, are you sure you want to go to war? These women have resources and connections." "Diane, our mother worked 30 years being humiliated by people like this. I'm not going to repeat her history. Not when I have Emma to protect." The mention of Emma made Diane understand the gravity of the situation. She knew her sister had developed a genuine maternal bond with the child, something that had blossomed naturally after years of working with traumatized children in public schools. "All right, give me their full names in 48 hours. I'll find out everything you need to know." Meanwhile, David had begun his own silent investigation. He discreetly hired private investigator Marcus Thompson, a specialist in background checks on the social elite. What Marcus discovered about the 5 candidates was disturbing. Victoria Ashworth had been expelled from 2 charitable organizations for financial irregularities, hushed up by her family's fortune. Priscilla Montgomery had a history of labor, lawsuits filed by employees alleging harassment and racial discrimination. Christina Hawthorne had lost her medical license in 2 states before settling in Georgia. Rebecca Sterling had been investigated by the IRS for tax evasion. Amanda Chase was being sued by 3 former employees of her hotel chain for creating a hostile work environment based on racial discrimination. Mr. Blackwood, Marcus said during an encrypted phone call, "These women aren't just prejudiced. They're systemic predators who use their social position to destroy vulnerable people." Meanwhile, at the mansion, the 5 candidates escalated their attacks on Kesha. Victoria devised a meticulous plan to create situations in which Kesha would appear incompetent or unprofessional. "We need to document every mistake, every time she crosses professional boundaries," Victoria instructed during a morning meeting in Priscilla's bedroom. "David is a rational man. With enough evidence, he'll be forced to fire her." Priscilla opened her laptop and displayed a document she had prepared. "I've created a detailed behavioral report. Allegations of violating family privacy, inappropriate influence over Emma, attempts to emotionally manipulate her boss. All lies, but very well substantiated," added Christina, admiring the legal sophistication of the document. "With my medical background, I can add concerns about psychological impact on the child." Rebecca and Amanda exchanged satisfied smiles. They were convinced they had engineered Kesha's perfect destruction, professional, systematic, and impossible to contest by a mere cleaning lady with no resources or formal education. What they didn't know was that Kesha had anticipated this exact strategy. During her years working in public schools, she had faced principals and coordinators who used identical tactics to remove black teachers who didn't fit the institutional culture. That afternoon, while discreetly cleaning David's office, Kesha found the candidate report open on the printer. She quickly read each accusation, each malicious distortion of her interactions with Emma, each attempt to twist her genuine affection into something inappropriate or suspicious. Instead of panic or despair, Kesha felt a cold calm spread through her body. It was the same serenity she had developed at 14, when she saw her mother fired for excessive emotional closeness with the children she cared for. That night, after Emma fell asleep, Kesha made another crucial phone call, this time to her former supervisor at Clark Atlanta University, Professor Angela Morrison, one of the leading authorities on child development and separation trauma. "Professor Morrison, I need your professional help documenting the emotional well-being of a child in a very delicate situation." Dr. Morrison, who had advised Kesha on her dissertation on reparative bonds in orphaned children, immediately understood the gravity of the request. "Kesha, you want me to conduct an independent psychological evaluation?" "Exactly. And I need it done in a way that will be indisputable in any court or legal situation." During the 40-minute conversation that followed, Kesha outlined not only a defense plan, but also an offensive strategy, one that would use the very academic and professional expertise her attackers assumed she lacked. The next day, David watched through the cameras as the candidates carried out their most cruel sabotage yet. They had hidden Emma's favorite teddy bear, a gift from her late mother, and then discovered it in Kesha's closet. "Emma, honey, we found your teddy bear," Victoria announced dramatically, pulling the toy from the closet as Emma cried, desperately. "It was in the employee's room." The girl looked at Kesha with confusion and hurt. "Kesha, why did you take my teddy bear?" "I didn't take it, sweetie," Kesha replied calmly, though David could see the pain in her eyes on the monitor. "Someone must have put him there by mistake." "Mistake?" Priscilla said, feigning disbelief. "Emma, did you leave your teddy bear in the employee's room?" "No," whispered Emma through her tears. "I always leave him on my bed." Christina knelt, down to the child's height. "Honey, sometimes people, different people, take things that aren't theirs. Not necessarily out of malice, but out of envy or a desire to have nice things." At that moment, David saw something extraordinary. Instead of desperately defending herself, Kesha simply hugged Emma and whispered, My little one, you know in your heart that I would never take anything of yours, and people who truly love you would never try to confuse that heart." The mature wisdom and unshakable dignity of that response contrasted brutally with the calculated cruelty of the 5 women. David realized he was witnessing not just racial discrimination, but a systematic attempt to psychologically destroy both his employee and his daughter. That night, while the candidates celebrated what they thought was their definitive victory, Kesha received a call from Diane that would completely change the game. "Sister, you won't believe what I found out about your new friends. And best of all, it's all publicly documented. They're much more vulnerable than they realize." Across the mansion, David had reached his own breaking point. He had seen enough, gathered enough evidence, and made a decision that left him both furious and determined. It was time to stop watching passively and start taking action. But first, he needed to have a very serious conversation with a woman he had completely underestimated. A woman who was about to discover she had allies and resources far more powerful than any of her attackers imagined. Each cruelty had only strengthened Kesha's resolve and revealed a character that turned every attack into fuel for a response as intelligent as it was devastating, proving that sometimes the person who seems most vulnerable is the one who holds the most lethal weapons in a war her enemies didn't even know they had already lost. The following Friday, David called a special meeting. He discreetly invited Dr. Angela Morrison, Diane Williams-Johnson from CNN, and investigator Marcus Thompson. The 5 candidates showed up, thinking they would finally receive the decision on who would be chosen. "Ladies, before I announce my decision, I'd like to share some interesting findings," David said, turning on the screen in the room. Victoria smiled confidently. "Sure, David, we're eager to hear them." The first image appeared, a news article titled "Heiress Diverts Charity Funds." Victoria's photo was splashed across the headline. "That's a lie!" Victoria shouted, her face turning red. "Is it?" asked Diane, standing up. "I'm Diane Williams-Johnson, CNN. I confirm every word of this report." David clicked. To the next slide. A photo of Priscilla Montgomery appeared, along with the headline, "Sued for racial discrimination against 3 black employees." "David, this is out of context," Priscilla said nervously. "Context?" interrupted Marcus Thompson. "I'm a private investigator. All of these documents are public and verified." The next images devastated Christina, Rebecca, and Amanda one by one. Lawsuits for medical malpractice, tax evasion, and creating a hostile work environment. "You are all systemic predators," David said coldly, "and I have documented every attack you've made against Kesha." He played the recordings. The voices of the 5 women echoed through the room. Racist comments, plans for sabotage, even the setup involving Emma's teddy bear. "This is an invasion of privacy," Victoria yelled. "In my own home." David laughed bitterly. "Where? You plotted to destroy an innocent person?" Dr. Morrison stepped forward. "As a child development expert, I evaluated Emma this week. She demonstrates healthy, restorative bonds with Kesha, which are essential to her post-traumatic recovery." Emma, who had been called into the room, ran straight to Kesha. "Kesha, you're not leaving, are you?" "No, sweetheart." Kesha said calmly, hugging her. David looked directly at the 5 women. "Kesha Williams has a degree in education from Clark Atlanta University, 3 specializations in child development, and impeccable references. You assumed she was just a cleaning lady because she's black." Victoria tried one last move. "David, you're making a terrible mistake. Think of the social standing. Think of Emma's future." "I am thinking," David interrupted. "Kesha, will you marry me?" The silence was deafening. Kesha looked at Emma, then at David. "I will," she said. Emma screamed with joy. "Now Kesha will be my real mom." The 5 candidates were in total shock. Victoria was pale as a sheet. "Impossible," Christina whispered. "You're going to marry the maid?" "I'm marrying the most honest woman I know," David replied. "The woman who cared for my daughter with true love, while you plotted to destroy her out of pure prejudice. Diane was filming everything. This story will be on the air Monday. Racist socialites exposed. The fall of 5 elite predators. Their reputations, careers, and social circles are destroyed," Marcus added. "All documented and irrefutable." Victoria tried to leave, but David stopped her. "Oh, one last thing. I'm suing all of you for conspiracy, slander, and attempted character assassination. My lawyers are already on it." The 5 left the mansion humiliated, photographed by journalists Diane had called. Their phones were already buzzing with angry calls from clients, friends, and family who had seen the first leaks on social media. Kesha remained standing, dignified and serene, holding Emma in her arms. "Thank you for believing in me," she said to David. "Thank you for showing me what really matters," he replied, kissing her gently. While the former contestants faced the total collapse of their privileged lives, a new family was born, built on true love, mutual respect, and the ultimate victory of dignity over prejudice. It proved that sometimes the greatest revenge is simply to live well, while those who tried to destroy you watch their own masks fall publicly, revealing who they truly were behind all that false sophistication. 2 years later, Diane's article had become a case study on racial discrimination in journalism schools across the country. The 5 women faced devastating and permanent consequences. Victoria Ashworth lost her family inheritance when the board discovered her charitable embezzlement. She now works as a sales clerk in a department store, constantly recognized by customers who saw the story. Priscilla Montgomery was fired from her law firm and had her license suspended. Rebecca Sterling went bankrupt after losing all her architectural clients. Christina Hawthorne moved to another state after her clinic closed. Amanda Chase sold her hotels to pay worker compensation claims. Meanwhile, Kesha prospered in extraordinary ways. David had insisted she finish her master's degree in special education, and she now ran a foundation offering scholarships to underprivileged children for music and the arts. "Mom, Kesha, look what I learned on the piano today," Emma shouted, running home after class. At 9, she had mastered 3 instruments and spoke fluent Portuguese after lessons with Kesha's grandmother, who had moved into the mansion. The family had grown. 6-month-old David Jr. slept peacefully in Kesha's arms as she organized documents for the foundation named after Emma. "Honey, another thank you letter," David said, handing her an envelope. "This one's from a mother in Detroit whose son got a full scholarship to study violin." Kesha smiled, remembering a recent conversation with Emma. The girl had asked why the mean girls had tried to send her away. "Sweetie," Kesha had replied, "some people are born with everything and think that makes them better than others. But you know the secret? People like that always destroy themselves, because kindness and cruelty cannot live in the same heart." During an interview on the country's most watched morning show, David was asked about his controversial decision to marry Kesha. "Controversial?" He laughed. "I married a woman who is educated, intelligent, saved my daughter from depression, and taught me the true meaning of family. If that's controversial, then the problem isn't with me." The host pressed on. "But what about the social differences?" "What differences?" David replied, looking directly into the camera. "My wife has a master's degree, runs a foundation that has benefited over 1,000 children, speaks 3 languages, and raises my children with more love and wisdom than any socialite could ever dream of having." Kesha watched from home, Emma on her lap, smiling proudly at the man who had chosen to love her exactly as she was. At school, other children constantly asked Emma about her famous mother. "She's the bravest woman in the world," Emma would reply proudly. "And she makes the best chocolate cake, too." Kesha's true revenge had not been destroying her attackers. It had been living so well that her happiness became undeniable proof that people like Victoria had always been wrong about human worth. That Sunday morning, as she watched David playing with her children in the same garden where she had once been humiliated, Kesha reflected on how life had changed. It wasn't just that she had won. It was that she had turned her victory into something greater than herself, love. David called from the garden. "Come here. Emma wants to show you the song she wrote for you." Kesha walked toward the family she had built, knowing that sometimes the greatest revenge against prejudice is not to strike back with anger, but to respond with so much love and success that you completely rewrite the rules of the game. If you believe that dignity and true love always win over prejudice and evil, subscribe to the channel for more stories that prove that, in the end, those who truly love always find their place in the world. A place far bigger and more beautiful than their enemies could ever imagine.